Welcome to the Asset Preservation Hour with Stewart Willis. He is the president of Asset Preservation Wealth and Tax right here in Arizona, offices all over the place. I'm your host, Spengel. Mr. Stewart Willis, how are you doing this week?
Oh, living the dream here. Another great week here in the nice, cool summers of Arizona.
Yes, well, we were doing our radio programs also on Saturdays and Sundays. We do an hour-long program, and we have been talking this week about estate planning. Mistakes that people make, the things that people need to do, and I think one of the biggest reasons that people put off estate planning is they think that they don't have a large enough, quote-unquote, estate. They don't have $15 million or $30 million or $100 million, and they don't need to do estate planning. Mr. Stewart Willis, when did you start doing your estate planning?
Well, look, I say do as I say, not as I do, because, look, I'm a hypocrite. I fully admit it. But look, asset preservation was created by a good friend of mine in 1997, a good friend named Paul Mumford. He tragically died in a private plane crash, and of course, unexpected, right? But when he created asset preservation originally, he created it to be able to provide estate planning to people that weren't named Rockefeller, right? Average ma and pa, people that had a house, had some retirement savings, etc. And the point was to make sure that those assets were directed in the way that, you wanted them directed, not the way that the state decided who would get the money. And so, I'm trying to avoid your original question of when did I get mine done?
Come on. So I always ask people, do you eat your own cooking? It's like, do you do what you tell everybody else to do?
About 6 months ago, I got my trust done for my family. And look, I've been preaching them for 20 years. But look, life gets in the way. People get busy. We have stuff to do. And it's just easy to push off. And hopefully, the whole purpose of this show is to get you to take action. And hopefully by the end of today's show, you'll take action.
It might not be the first thing that people are thinking about on a Saturday or Sunday morning or afternoon, and we totally understand. But look, people react when the markets go up or down, and they call their financial advisor like yourself. Or people react when there's a life event, or people do their taxes or think about taxes during your tax season, which you love. That's your favorite time of your tax season. But there just usually needs to be some sort of life event that makes them go and do their estate planning, and you're trying to get them to do it right now while they don't have a busy moment in their life.
Yeah, we call those trigger events where, something that changes big in your life that, says, hey, I need to get this done for myself. And it's one of those things where, after, this weekend, we found out that one of my son's teammates, one of my 16-year-olds, he plays on a club basketball team, and one of the star players didn't show up. And we're like, oh my gosh, where is he at? Where's Twan at? And we go and find out he was shot. He was shot. 16-year-old boy was shot, and they don't have any of the resources to pay for their funeral. And I don't do this very often, but every once in a while I'll go onto Facebook and say, hey guys, let's rally as a community, help someone out. And we were able to raise money to bury him and make sure his family was taken care of. But these kind of tragic trigger events, things that happen in your life that are unexpected, they happen, and they happen when you never expect them. So it's really important to get your estate planning done so that it's you who decides what happens to your stuff, your life's work, rather than letting a court or a judge or the state decide who gets your money. So,
right. And if I can ask you then, and I did see that Facebook post, and I'm so glad that so many people rallied around it, but it is typically that life event. And sometimes the decisions or your options are irreversible after that life event. Someone has a stroke. Someone needs to be taken care of. How do we take care of their business and the assets? So let me start out with this. Is having a will enough in place for our estate? Does it depend on how much money we have? Does it depend on how many family members we have? What are some of the deciding factors?
Yeah, so there's a probate threshold. Obviously, it's $60,000, $70,000, and so if you have less than that, you can generally do a small estate affidavit. But look, a will is the place where you start. You need to, at minimum, have that. Now, look, I'm not giving legal advice to you specifically. I'm talking to you as a parent. I'm talking to you as a friend. Get your stuff in order, right? It doesn't take much effort to do that, to have it. But a will is great because it basically says, hey, you know what, I want all of my money to go to these 3 kids, and I want this person in charge. It puts the person in charge that you want in charge. The problem with it is, like, let's say you have a house, for example, Spike, right? And you leave that to your 2 kids. Well, when your 2 kids, after you pass away, your 2 kids are going to take it to a real estate agent, and they're going to say, hey, our title company wants to know whether you actually have the right to sell this. And when you show them the will, they're going to say, hey, you know what? We need the court to release it to you guys. And that's the process of probate.
So this gets kind of grim, but it's like I can't just go with the death certificate and say mom and dad are no longer around. The will says that we're allowed to take. Now I actually have to go through a court.
So the court has to interpret that to make sure it's legitimate. They legitimize it, and that's the releasing. And sometimes that can take months or years to go through that process.
And you're also not necessarily demonizing the probate court. You're just saying it's a process.
Yeah, look, I think that people, the judges who work there are honorable. They're great. I think the attorneys who work in this system are great. It's just expensive and generally avoidable at a substantially lower cost than going through that process in many cases. So when it comes time to deciding whether a trust or a will is right for you, I mean, it's a personal decision. And look, I am not here to give specific legal advice about your case, but what a living trust does differently is basically it does establish who's in charge and where does the money go. But the unique feature is, think about it like a corporation, and you're the president of your corporation. If something happens to you, you have a vice president that takes over. And you've instructed that vice president that upon your passing, they're to make certain distributions. And what happens is, ownership doesn't change when you pass, just management changes to the next level. So there's never that probate process when it's properly funded.
Right.
And so having a living trust avoids that for the assets that are properly funded.
Right, right. And I've also seen this. There was another colleague that we know in circles. He had 3 young daughters. He just had a tragic fall recently. He's a financial advisor in our industry. We just never know when something might be life event changing. And so it's not about an age or a dollar amount. It's about if you've got family members you care about and you want to make sure that your assets are doled out the way that you want them to, that we need to start estate. So estate planning really could be in your 30s, your 40s, or your 60s and 70s.
Absolutely. And look, there's no time like the present. You know, when I say do as I say, not as I do, you got to take action. Start looking at that. When we come back from break, we're going to talk about the specific documents that an estate planning portfolio has when we consider it a complete portfolio. So we'll be back in just a minute, and we look forward to seeing you.
More of the Asset Preservation Hour with Stewart Willis, president of Asset Preservation Wealth and Tax right here in Arizona. Offices all over the place. We've got 3 different offices, but if you're seeing us on the airwaves here, Stewart would be glad to sit down with you. We're going to talk more about estate planning and a fantastic offer we have about doing that. If you haven't been motivated to do your estate planning, give us a call, 833-602-7526. That's 602-PLAN. More with Stewart right after this.
They've got quite an extensive resume. Wow, so many years of management. Bet that was fun. So this job requires basic knowledge of the social media and video platforms, content creation, and SEO. How proficient are you in those areas?
Going back to work after retiring is not ideal. I'm Stewart Willis with Asset Preservation Wealth and Tax. If you have amassed a nest egg, it's time for a financial advisor to help you reach your retirement goals. We are in one of the greatest tax windows in history, so it makes sense to take advantage of this tax discount while you can with your partners in retirement. All of our expert advisors, CPAs, and enrolled agents are fiduciaries that specialize in retirement planning, tax mitigation, estate planning, and more. Plan your retirement right. Call right now for your own complimentary portfolio review and tax analysis.
Welcome back to the Asset Preservation Hour with Stewart Willis. I'm your host, Spike Spengel. Every single week, we provide retirement planning solutions, just like we do here on the TV show on our weekly radio program. Stewart, one of the reasons you wanted to talk about estate planning was an article you shared with me. This could be one of the largest generations of wealth passing in the next 20 to 25 years. Are talking about $85 trillion that could be moving from the baby boomers to their younger generation. And this is how we talk about building generational wealth is making sure that we do it properly. So you actually wanted to talk about some of the actual documents that go inside the trusts. And so what exactly do we need to do proper estate planning?
Yeah, so oftentimes people say, okay, yes, I have my living trust. But what they're saying in general is that they've set up an estate plan, right? And what a trust is, an estate planning portfolio isn't just a living trust. Now, the living trust is important because that basically says who's in charge, where's the money go, and it creates that succession plan. But the important thing about a trust and what separates it from a regular will is that you have to think about it like a corporation, right? So you are like the president of your trust, so to speak. You're the trustee. Now, if something happens to you, you are making somebody the successor trustee or like the vice president. So if something happens to you and your spouse, they become the vice president. Ownership doesn't change, just management of the assets change. And what they've done is you've instructed them that upon your passing, they're to make certain distributions or take certain actions. And so unlike a will, which basically is transferring assets immediately, what this is basically a management shift from you to the next generation or you to the people you've put in place. But the important thing is it has to be properly funded. The assets have to be put into the trust, and we'll get into that a bit later. But the living trust is just one of the documents.
What about, though, then those choices? Mm-hmm. Do we put all of the choices on our spouse who could be around our same age? I'm talking about those medical choices, the financial choices. Look, as we get into our 70s, our 80s, it's a lot then to be transferring over to our loved one. Do we automatically pass it to the kids, or do you put this in the hands of an attorney?
Yeah, well, Spike, if you don't want those decisions in the hand of your family, then put it in charge of whoever you want in charge. But look, what we're talking about now is while you're alive, making other financial decisions to be able to pay bills, things like that. Well, yes, that'll be your successor trustees. But there's also a document called your general durable power of attorney. It's to make sure that people can act as your proxy in the event that you're not capable of doing it yourself, right? You want somebody to act on your behalf. There's also the healthcare power of attorney. And remember, the healthcare power of attorney, you could have somebody different. For example, you may have a son who's a doctor or a daughter who's a nurse that would be better fit to handle those medical decisions than the financial ones, and vice versa. And people can have every combination of who's in charge. It's entirely up to them. So the general power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney. There's also a living will. And I think the living will is what confuses a lot of people. What the living will is, it's basically an end-of-life decision. So if, the basic question is, if you are in a persistent vegetative state or irreversible coma, and two doctors believe that your life will end in a relatively short period of time, do you want to be maintained on life support? Because, Spike, a lot of people see their entire life's work going down the tubes, so to speak, with, when they're on life support. It's really expensive. And oftentimes, even once it surpasses your limitations on insurance, if they know you have money, it's very possible. And look, doctors are great. I hate talking about it like this. But look, it's also a business, right? We've kind of seen that medicine is a business. And if you have the money to stay alive, generally you could stay alive longer.
I understand you're going the Walt Disney route. You want to be frozen. You want to be cryogenically seated just in case. There's the things that can be found to make us all smarter.
Absolutely. I want my head frozen and sent off to Mars. Me and Elon will be together.
Oh, gosh.
Right? No, look, everybody's...
These are the difficult conversations you can help have with people.
Well, look, it's a really difficult thing to have your kid decide on whether to pull the plug on you or not. Really, that should be your decision. How is it that you want to be treated, right? Because, look, you may have this, really great set of children that would never want to see their mother or father
Let's put it this way. It's taking the pressure off the kids.
Imagine that pressure. Imagine the pressure you put onto your kids to say, hey, should I pull the plug or not? What you're doing is you're taking it out of their hands saying, look, I don't want to be kept alive, or I do want to be kept alive, so that it's not on them. You're taking the pressure off of them, and you're making the decision yourself while you have the capacity.
Let's go to one more thing, though. So you can place things into a trust, and I get it. You'll put your investments, you'll put your estate. What about all the rest of the stuff? So, I mean, you don't necessarily itemize every trinket or piece of jewelry in the will or in the trust, or do you? Are you itemizing it all?
So remember, like I was talking about before, funding is super important. And by funding, we mean moving the assets into the trust. So if you have a home, for example, we'll set up a grant deed or a warranty deed to move the house, the title of the house, into the name of your trust. So you basically sign a deed that says, Joe Smith, as an individual, grants this property to Joe Smith, trustee of the Joe Smith Family Trust, dated whatever, and it is now in the trust. At the banks, we give you some letters to send to the bank. A certificate of trust. It's like a Reader's Digest version of the trust that you take to the bank, and you say, hey, I have a trust. I want my accounts in the trust, right? That puts it in there. But sometimes things get left out, like you mentioned. That fancy watch you're wearing, Spike, right? There's nowhere to go title it, right?
Got it off eBay.
And so that's what the pour-over will's for. So the last will and testament or pour-over will is also a part of what we do. And what that is it basically says that when you're gone, all your assets are granted to your trust, and then your trust distributes it the way that you've dictated.
Okay. Now, of course, you are the president, co-founder of Asset Preservation Wealth and Tax. We're usually talking about the investments. What are the tax implications of what's going on? But this week, you're doing something very specific for this program.
Yeah, absolutely. So normally, we only do estate planning for our financial clients. But what we want to do is get you on a push to get this stuff done. So what we're going to do is we're doing an absolutely complimentary portfolio review where we will look at what kind of fees you're paying on your portfolio, what kind of risks you're taking. And if you bring in your portfolio for us to review, what we will also do is we will give you an offer. If you go through the full process of our portfolio review, we are offering a 70% discount off of your trust. We will set up a full trust for you that includes the power of attorney, the living trust, the healthcare power of attorney, the living will, the last will and testament, all of those documents in there for a 70% off. And look, most people are paying $2,500 to $3,500 for their trust.
Or more even.
Or more, and it's a 70% off discount, and that is only for the first 15 people, because I know it's going to blow the phone lines up today, but if you can be one of the first 15 people to give us a call at 833-602-7526, or even easier, go to the website at assetpreservation.com or click on that QR code. It'll take you right there. For the first 15 callers or first 15 people to set up for that complimentary review, we'd be glad to help you. 70% off your estate planning documents today and today only.
Stewart, we're going to take a very short break right now. Folks, the reason why this is so important is the estate planning threshold is set to sunset in the next few years. It's literally going to be cut in half. It's going to go from about $12.9 million an individual can leave to their estate without taxes to their heirs. It's going to be cut in half down to $7 million. So it's incredibly important to get these levers started now, start moving them around. Call 833-602-7526. That's 602-PLAN, or use the QR code, like Stewart said, down on the bottom of the screen. We're going to come back with some of the biggest estate planning mistakes that Stewart sees in the office all the time, right after this break.
We know the market is going to get worse from here. This is the biggest monthly decline in 10 years. People's 401ks took a major hit.
Well, my investments are tanking. My retirement isn't going as planned. I can't believe I let my kid talk me into buying crypto. I mean, what is that anyway?
This was the fourth worst contraction in history.
So how are you two doing?
Your financial future doesn't have to be uncertain. I'm Stewart Willis with Asset Preservation Wealth and Tax. If you have amassed a nest egg, it's time for a financial advisor to help you reach your retirement goals. We are in one of the greatest tax windows in history, so it makes sense to take advantage of this tax discount while you can with your partners in retirement. All of our expert advisors, CPAs, and enrolled agents are fiduciaries that specialize in retirement planning, tax mitigation, estate planning, and more. Plan your retirement right. Call right now for your own complimentary portfolio review and tax analysis.
Welcome back to the Asset Preservation Hour with Stewart Willis, President of Asset Preservation Wealth and Tax, right here in Arizona. I'm Spike Spengel, your host, just like I am on your weekly radio show that we do an hour every single Saturday and Sunday. But we're talking about estate planning, and unfortunately, I don't think this last 10 minutes is going to leave us enough time to go through all of the mistakes that you see, but maybe a few of them, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I would say that the biggest mistake is not getting it done at all, right? People that intend to get it done, but they don't. I mean, you look at people that have amassed real nest eggs, people like Prince and Elvis and all of these very famous situations where, of course, they wanted their planning done, but they never did. And it became this very public process where everybody, the general public, got to know exactly what they had.
Right. Oh, come on. I know you were at the Michael Jackson concert when you were younger. And you know, huge estates where people... So look, part of the estate planning, it's not just for you. It might not be a fun conversation. Do all of your kids get along? Or does everybody always agree? Part of the estate planning is family peace of mind insurance.
It is. And let me just tell you, if it's hard enough keeping a family together when there are no money issues at all. But look, what I tell our clients, and this is almost a non-starter here, I make a commitment to my clients, my financial clients, that if something happens to them, I will be there for their kids. I promise I'll be there. So long as I don't get hit by a bus, I will be there. I will take care of the processing. I will make sure that the transition is easy. But they have to do their part. They have to get their trust done. They have to have their estate plan done. Because I am not going to hang out with their kids in probate court. It's unnecessary. Yeah. It's just not necessary. Literally, with the deal that we're offering today, they can get their trust done, get it done. It's unbelievable, right?
I think one of the biggest mistakes that you and I have talked about is not the mistake of making a decision, but not reviewing your decision. You've seen folks who've gone through divorce. Let's be honest about that. The beneficiary designations. I mean, just a review. There's a lot of folks who think they have a trust in place because they did it 15 years ago.
Yeah. So the other mistakes we see that you're hinting at there is where people have set up a trust, but they did them 10 years ago, 15 years ago. They're giving their 30-year-old children to the neighbors next door who died, 10 years ago, right? And at the end of the day, life changes. People go in different directions, and maybe your assets have changed. So you may have the wrong beneficiaries or trustees. The people that were in charge are no longer friends of yours anymore. Maybe that's something you need to look at. But then also, the biggest, in my opinion, is also funding of the trust. So we talked about that before, right? Making sure that when you go to, you set up your trust, you put the property inside the trust with these deeds. But what we've seen, especially with interest rates that just went to these super low levels, people refinanced, and these mortgage companies don't like you to be in a trust. So it has to, when they retitle it, they're putting it back into your individual names. Oftentimes, there's a bunch of additional work to get it back into the trust, and you never did that properly. So maybe, just maybe, it's in your name and not in your trust name. Or if you took advantage of some of these really good CD rates that we've been seeing lately, or these new savings account rates, if you're one of these CD shoppers or bank rate shoppers, maybe you set up an account and you did it in your individual name rather than in your trust. Well, what good does that do? Because those assets potentially could go through a probate process unnecessarily.
I think maybe another mistake, because I know that I do this myself, is just probably overcomplicating them in my mind. Can you talk to me a little bit about revocable, irrevocable, charitable trust? I mean, I think that, well, this is too complicated. I don't need this. I'm just going to do the will and the life insurance. It's going to go to my spouse anyway, so I'm all good. Am I overcomplicating?
Well, I think it is important to understand, look, first of all, that's what we have attorneys for. And whenever we set up a trust, they always get to speak with one of our attorneys. That will be your attorney. They have an attorney, client privilege relationship with you. It is a you and them relationship. But, you guys will decide what the proper document. Look, I've been delivering these documents for 20 plus years, right? I've done as many as most people have in this state. But you know what? I'm not an attorney. That's what we have attorneys for. It's the same reason I don't do your taxes. My CPAs and my enrolled agents do our clients' taxes. Hire a professional that knows what they're doing, that can determine what the right document is. So that conversation and what it looks like is we basically go through an interview. We say, okay, well, who do you want in charge? Where does the money go? We list the assets. And when we're doing that, the attorney will look at it and say, hey, you know what? I really think that we need to look at a more advanced trust. Maybe it's a charitable remainder trust if all this money is going to charity, or maybe it is a irrevocable life insurance trust or an ILIT trust. There's all kinds of different trusts to avoid certain taxes and make your kids.
Can I ask you a real quick question on that? We said the ILIT. Life insurance, I always thought this one was one of the simpler ones, because we've talked about taxes ad nauseum on our different programs. Doesn't the life insurance go tax-free over to the spouse? Why do we want to put it in a trust, or why would someone?
Well, an example, like with an ILIT trust, and once again, it's not appropriate for everybody, but an irrevocable life insurance trust, which is ILIT, is a trust that oftentimes, first of all, it's irrevocable. So when you send it to the trust, you sent it to a separate document. It has its own tax ID number, and that trust, basically, you lose some control over that asset. But guess what? Because you've lost control over it, it's also in many cases protected from your creditors. So you may want to have separate assets that creditors can't attach, so that if you spend through all of your money, or you have to go through long-term care or one of these other kind of expensive processes, that at least you know it's covered. Because a lot of people live their whole retirement because they want to make sure they leave something to the kids. Well, with proper estate planning, you can, have your cake and eat it too. You can go enjoy life, spend all of your money, and still know that those things have been taken care of for the kids down the road.
So if you place things like the home or other assets into specific kinds of trusts, especially the irrevocable, then those are protected from creditors.
Yeah, in some cases, but there's some downsides as well, which is why you don't want to do it yourself. You don't want to do your own surgery. Look.
I can't do this online? I thought there's all these now online and these AI algorithms that will help me out.
Yeah, go into ChatGPT and see how that works out for you.
Design my trust, ChatGPT.
Hey, try it. I'm not saying it's going to work, but give it hell. I mean, it may work. I just don't know that you want to gamble your life's work on the internet.
Okay.
It sounds a little silly.
We're going to have to wrap up today, though. But what we're doing, it's very specific only to this program.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the first 15 callers or first 15 people to go to assetpreservation.com or click on that QR code, we're offering a 70% discount on our estate plans. The catch is you have to do a complimentary portfolio review. If you go through that process, we will absolutely provide to you an estate plan at 70% off the regular price, which is generally $2,500 to $3,500.
Right. And so when we say the catch, folks, the catch is when we say complimentary review, it is complimentary, a no-cost review of your assets, what your investment strategy is, how much you're paying in fees. We'll also take a look at your taxes. Then for those who have heard the message of why it is so important to do your estate planning, whether you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, or 70s, it's time for you to do it. And we want to make you the offer. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week.